We'd like to welcome everyone to our work session tonight for Bountiful City Council, and we will be discussing, reviewing the general plan, the land use portion, and so we'll turn the time over to our planner, Francisco Astorga.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for the time being, for the time that we get to present, and we're simply following the what we agreed upon or what we decided to follow along regarding the schedule for these work sessions and the general plan. So here we are looking at the land use element. We've taken the drafted text for the land use element. We've reviewed it. I've reviewed it. Amber's reviewed it, and also Mr. Hill helped us out a little bit with this. And we have that as an exhibit on your packets here. But what we're really looking for tonight is policy direction regarding each section and each element. If you happen to find a typo or a missing comma or punctuation, we'll handle those. That's not what we want to focus on tonight, necessarily wordsmithing every single sentence, but the direction that we're looking for is regarding the policies that are found in this land use element. So,
Okay, so just to clarify, we're not, we're looking more big picture.
correct.
This isn't really wordsmithing every word. This is looking at more the big picture of the ideas being presented here.
That's it. Thank you, Mayor,
Thank
for that.
you.
The question that you should be asking at the end of each section is council comfortable with the policy found in this section? That's what we're really looking for. So that's the quick intro, and we're just going to jump right onto it. The first section that we have is the land use strategy overview. We simply provide an introduction, and this is an introduction to the entire chapter. We then move on and talk about the 5 character areas. By the way, those areas are not found in the packet tonight. Those are specific directives and policies that will come back at the very end as we come back and show you that land use map. That's when we're going to talk about these 5 character areas. Yet it is part of this chapter, and that's why we have a quick introduction on what those, how the plan relates to those specific character areas. And then we move on to the different place types. And this was the work that was provided by the consultant with the help of the steering committee. And in this document that we have prepared or drafted and reviewed, you'll find 9 different place types. Place types is just a fancy word for a land use category. They're broad, general areas. These are not the same as a zoning district. Keep those in the back of your mind for the future as we update the land use code. Please keep in mind that a place type may support different zoning districts. It's not one land use type, which may then that's going to be one zoning district. It may support at least one. It could support several of them. What those will be, that'll be the work of the planning staff once the general plan is completely adopted, as we try to find out a strategy of working in-house or working with submitted applications for code changes or zoning map amendments. So please keep that in the back of your minds, that the place type is not a zoning district, but it's a precursor to each zoning district. Each place type will have a sample photograph. It'll have a description of that narrative. It'll have key attributes. It'll have a diagram or a sampling of what we think it should look like. And if necessary, it may have a specific density pattern. Moving on to the next section, before we jump into the first one, is that the general plan, as we draft plans, it's not going to have every answer to every problem that's going to come across. The general plan, while it is intended to be a living document, based on current trends, based with the economy, actual housing affordability that it applies to us in the state, and changes to the technological aspect, we cannot oversee and think about every single problem or issue or solution that we might have in the near future. So we wanted to at least get that in the public as far as that expectation. It should help us in making decisions. Staff, we do believe that general plan should be advisory in nature because of the diverse different components that we simply cannot control and we can't keep up with. In that decision-making guidance, we do have criteria that we should always review as we're taking a proposal, a project, a zoning map amendment, a land use code amendment. We should always take a look at what's in this plan as far as those goals, strategies, actions, and policies. But also, we should also go back to this page and help us in that process. So number one's pretty easy, is following the general plan's vision and guiding policies. Second one, being consistent with the goals and actions. Third one, advance the character's intent. Four, be compatible with the future land use map. I think we left one out, Gary. That could have been a mistake on my end. But we also wanted to keep here being consistent with the city's visioning document process, what we reviewed last week. No, we don't want to put that one on here.
Just something we can add later.
We could add later. We thought it would be a good idea to be consistent with the policies that you get to review on an annual basis. And then we do want to enhance and protect natural and built amenities and infrastructure, strengthen or create connections to activity centers. And then we have two more regarding demand on public infrastructure, including the transportation network, planned facilities, et cetera, as well as life costs of the public, to the public, of constructing, maintaining, and operating infrastructure. So we should always be consistent, and again, this is, the general plan is a simple tool to help staff, the planning commission, the city council, and the public in general to get towards that direction that we should be heading towards. This is something, this little chart here, it is not on your packets, but this is intended to help you identify how each land use type is different from one another. So it's a simple intensity analysis, and it's somewhat obvious when we start with parks, open space, and civic place type, in that we're not going to have any development there. We're going to simply, in this area, and Amber's going to jump into this one in just a moment here, we're going to develop trails. As we move on from that one, we're kind of getting from the east side of the city, and we're kind of coming towards the west as that intensity in development starts increasing. So we move on from that to that foothill, residential, mixed residential, transient, ready development, neighborhood center, community commercial, and then commercial corridor. Notice that I didn't put necessarily downtown in this higher intensity, solely because of the location of where the downtown district is located, and also based in that it's more of a special place type based on its location and all the great work that the city has done in the last 20 years regarding where Main Street wants to be. So if you don't have any questions or comments regarding this, actually, yeah, let's take a break right here to see if you have any comments regarding this first section, which is the simple introduction of the place types.
Anybody have any questions?
Thank you. So Amber has a better voice than me, so she's gonna help us, guide us through the place types, and she's got 3 family members that wanted to see her in action. So I'm gonna have her, she's gonna go over the place types, and then as we go through every single one, we'll probably take a quick break to allow you to ask any questions or follow-ups regarding each place type.
Okay, so we'll go in order, starting, you're gonna drive,
Yeah,
right?
I'll drive.
So we're just going in order with the intensity. So let's start with the lowest one here. We've got parks, open space, and civic. And the primary land uses here would be open space, obviously, and then institutions, and supporting land uses would be utilities. There's that diagram there showing how that might be laid out. And then we have the key attributes that I'll go over real quick. So for this area or place type, we've got large green spaces, including mountainsides and ravines, largely free from development, preserving important viewsheds, habitat, and other ecological functions. Institutions generally also provide space for recreation and leisure. We're also seeing parks and plazas with a variety of functions to suit the area it serves. And so with that, I will take a break here and see if you have any questions or comments.
I just have a question about the institutions. Is that like churches with their green space, or like what, schools?
So,
Cemeteries.
Francisco, do you want to answer that
Yeah,
one?
it's intended not so much, it's intended for uses that are owned and maintained by the cities or by the city or government facilities.
So example would be the Bountiful Square, right, with its facilities and there,
Another one would be the library
or the library.
or the rec district.
I had a question about, in the last sentence, parks and plazas should be customized to the needs of the neighborhoods they serve. And I was particularly wondering about the word customized. There are some of our parks that have certain facilities that no other park has. You know, for instance, pickleball courts or skate parks. And I don't know that we're able to customize each park to each neighborhood. If we were, then maybe every single park would have, you know, one of every preferred park element, but sometimes we're space constrained, sometimes we're budget constrained. And so the word customized to the needs of the neighborhoods, this felt like maybe we were promising things that would be very difficult to deliver, that they be customized, and that I don't know what we would decide is the geographic boundary of, you know, 2 blocks or 3 blocks is the people who get to pick versus, you know, if we find a space where we can serve a need that the whole city would be able to access from a recreation standpoint.
Yeah, I believe that the intent here from the consultant and the steering committee was to simply to have a community involvement whenever we get to redevelop a park. So we can either change that last sentence to say something to the effect of appropriate community involvement, or we can strike it out altogether. That's the whole point here is to involve the public.
And I would agree
maybe-
that public's involvement is good, but the way it's phrased of customized to the needs of the neighborhood,
Right.
I think is promising something that maybe wouldn't be appropriate.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. So if you guys want to take that sentence back and just make a recommendation, I think that's a good.
That's a great comment.
Any other thoughts on green space, on parks, open space?
If I could, I think rather than just striking that sentence, it would be great to incorporate what you mentioned, Mr. Astorga, and that is robust community or neighborhood involvement in the planning of what amenities will be at that park or plaza.
Okay,
We can
Great.
certainly do that.
we can
Thanks.
move to the next one. So this is the Foothill residential place type. As you can see that the primary land use is the residential detached. There's images of examples there. And supporting land uses are open space, utilities, and institutions. And so the key attributes of this are the predominantly large lots with detached housing with high separation between structures. Also, it provides a transition from open space in the mountains to the urban areas. And finally, there's few commercial services here.
So I had a thought on this. Nothing here I would object to. I wondered as I read this, my mind thought of a couple different neighborhoods that have a pretty good number of twin homes or duplex style buildings. And if that could be added, like I quickly just sketched characterized primarily by single-family dwellings with some twin home areas. I don't know how you want to do that, but I felt like it was
include it.
noteworthy that even on our high bench areas, we've been able to accommodate that quite successfully.
And what do you think, Councilman Bell, about, since it says it's primarily, you
So
know,
like,
that's the primary
I agree
use,
that that's
but-
true.
but there could be other uses.
What areas are you thinking of? Is like the Maple Hills?
That's one, and then there's one south west of the Temple area, as you're driving up on that.
So aren't those both in the neighborhood residential? Because as I recall from when we had been in our work sessions with the joint planning and council, that Foothill Residential was primarily above Bountiful Boulevard, and neighborhood residential was predominantly
Okay,
below Bountiful Boulevard, and those developments are both
if that's,
below.
if that's true, that's great. I was thinking, yeah,
We do have the townhomes by the fire station
yeah.
above
That's another one.
Bountiful Boulevard, but that's the only instance I'm aware of.
Okay.
be a little more specific.
I was thinking even, I wasn't thinking where the boundary might be. I was just thinking kind of in my mind Foothill Residential. But I'm comfortable with it. It wasn't a major sticking point for me. I just,
Just a suggestion, just an idea.
yeah.
Before moving on to the next one, we do want to point out that when this council, or when the council, when you legislated regarding ADUs, we opted not to exclude any neighborhoods. So this land use type, place type, would include ADUs. We are not changing a stance on that or recommending excluding areas from ADUs. We just realized we don't have that on here. We should probably add it in the narrative, in that we don't want to exclude the possibility of an accessory dwelling unit in this place type.
So
So we want to be consistent with what you have already indicated.
I think it's true, we want to be consistent. I don't know if we need to include that in all of the place types, that it is a allowed use. But I agree, we want to be consistent, so. Any thoughts on that?
I wonder if state law takes care of that for us.
I'm comfortable adding it, just for clarity. If we're not excluding it in the Foothill area, it can be added and just like it is in all the other sections. In my mind, I don't have
Sure.
any objection to such.
Councilman Bell, what would you add? What phrase specifically? Or what housing type or types?
You mean for the ADUs, or?
No, I'm just talking about, you had mentioned initially that you would prefer to have something in there about duplexes, twin homes, multiple family dwellings.
And this is where, if
families with shared
if the
walls.
council's comfortable, we can give the idea to staff, and then they can play around with that and come with a recommendation.
But this is kind of an important policy question, because right now, this place type does not contemplate anything other than single-family residential. So if you want it to, this would be a good time to discuss that.
Although they're saying that there are townhomes, right?
I think in some of those cases, if we look back, and I've been trying to connect with a friend of mine whose dad developed Maple Hills. I think that's a unique circumstance that a large amount of land was available at that time. I don't see for like the apartments or townhomes there being something like that in the future. And I think that a lot of the residents that have invested lots of money above that Bountiful Boulevard area would meet us in frustration that there's even possibility of more multifamily units up in there.
Yeah, it's possible. You're right. Like like in the future, do we foresee more multifamily being built? That's a good policy question, right? So just in general, when we think as a council about what that includes, what the foothill
I like-
I
I like that part, I mean, just the part of writing something maybe in the place type definition of that references ADUs, but then puts us in a position to be a little bit more detailed and strict on an ADU policy for the city, so that it's not in every single place type, but that it's just kind of a blanket, and then there's a very specific policy that falls in line with ADUs. Then that way, if a homeowner chooses to create that kind of an atmosphere in their home for family members in the future, there's a policy that they have to follow.
I think unfortunately, HB 82 from a couple years ago from the legislature greatly restricts our abilities to
That policy in
put that
place.
policy in place.
And we have an ordinance that allows them.
So, yeah, that would be, I mean, but for our state legislature, I would likely find myself in great agreement with you about a more thoughtful application, but it got taken out of our hands.
So when we look at what the foothill residential, what's before us, do council members feel like we need to add or take away? And do we feel like we can just give staff some general idea that they can wordsmith, or?
So I just want to make sure I state this. I'm uncomfortable adding additional density to this zone. So I think that this is a zone that is on our steepest part of our city, and I would resist wordsmithing in anything that added more density. I have one non-density related thing after we finish this point for this zone that I think would also be an important consideration, but I'll wait till we finish this discussion point.
I'm also comfortable with the way it's written, but I was hoping to hear what Councilmember Bell wanted to propose.
So I believe by far and large, density, that it is not the place we want density. But I know there's little pieces of the hillside that are flat and are not steep. And when designed appropriately, I think of Park City, where they've tucked wonderful twin home style buildings that can be quite big and look very much like the neighboring homes, really quite nicely. And to just carte blanche say no twin homes kind of makes me a little uncomfortable. I might be the minority, but I think there's places in Bountiful where we've seen it done successfully. But there by the fire station is a good example of that, where it doesn't stand out as high density, and they've put quite a few units in there that are quite comfortable, and I think the neighbors don't mind, and people like to be next to the hillside that aren't in a single family. But I'm not overly concerned either way, because we don't have a lot of land up there to develop either.
Question, does the word primarily indicate that there would be some flexibility if a good project came along, or does that not allow flexibility?
Well, let me maybe answer that.
Please.
Being that this is the general plan and not the zoning code, this would suggest that there is flexibility if the council wanted to add something into the zoning, into that specific zone.
Cool. What do you think, Councilmember?
I'm okay.
Yeah, I think that makes more sense.
Nice.
Okay, if everybody's okay with that, then we'll just move forward,
I
but,
had the one other item.
oh yeah, thanks, sorry about that, Councilwoman Bradshaw.
So this zone, or this place type, what are we calling these? Character area, because of its hallmark of being against the foothills, this might be a place to describe any additional features to make sure that we are wildfire resistant. And it didn't seem that that maybe we had put anything in there where that would be important, where this sits in our front line of our wildland urban interface.
I think that's a wonderful observation.
And I think, I know we're sometimes restricted by the state on some of those architectural features, but I think we were in state code allowed to introduce some where we had wildfire dangers. And so to me, this foothill residential character area would be the place where we should definitely insert some of those in so that we build thoughtfully if we have new construction.
I like that. Yeah,
We can do that.
thanks. Good
insight.
suggestion, yeah. Any other thoughts on foothill residential?
Okay, next, we've got our neighborhood residential, and the primary uses for this place type are residential detached and residential attached. Supporting land uses include open space, residential multi-unit, mixed use, commercial, utilities, and institutions. Key attributes for this place type are primarily detached residential dwellings on mid-sized lots, other neighborhood-scale residential typologies limited to major roadways and transition areas, interspersed with schools, places of worship, and parks, and few and low-density commercial services. Any comments or questions for this one?
So, correct me if I'm wrong, but this would probably be the character area that would make up the vast majority of Bountiful.
Yep.
So this is kind of the heart of our residential area. I think that we have added a tremendous amount of density by listing townhomes, cottage courts, triplexes, fourplexes, duplexes, and I'm not quite comfortable with throwing the doors that wide open.
Do you feel like we have those types of buildings and residences already in this zone?
I feel like we do have them, and they should be sparing in terms, especially of the attached housing types versus the single-family housing types. But the way we've described this makes it, to me, feel like they're going to be much more common, and that's where I'm uncomfortable.
Do you feel that duplexes, fourplexes, triplexes, townhomes, et cetera, do you feel that if there's mitigation with, if we have any sort of say in there?
I don't think we have much say if it goes in the general plan based on where the legislature will head. So I think we have to act as though this will be a binding general plan at some point, and so I'm not comfortable with that density. I'm also not comfortable with the 1 to 3 stories. If you're thinking about a fourplex, for instance, that's 3 stories, that's a very imposing feature in one of our traditional neighborhoods.
I agree with you, and I share your concern. I really do. And then I look at examples that have really been thoughtfully done, and as I go on walks and I see these, I wouldn't have ever seen them if I'd been driving by them. And somehow I feel like I know our hands have been tied, and so the state's trying to get us to increase our density, and because they've tied our hands, it makes us want to lower the density in some regards, because we're worried about what might happen if we open the door too wide.
If I may double check in that the way that this sentence came out, and it's highlighted here on the screen, it does talk about these higher intensity uses found and are generally limited to areas with direct access to major roadways and or providing transition from more intense uses. So the work of the consultant and the steering committee didn't necessarily say it would be allowed everywhere. It is in strategic places. What that strategy is, TBD, once we start rewriting the zoning code.
But one of those, so if we were to go with this, a major roadway or, like with Davis Boulevard?
That would depend with the legislative body at the time. I don't want to get too far ahead of it. It's a question for, at least it should be, I would say we should consider it, but I can't say that absolutely yes or no.
So for roads in Bountiful, I mean, we know that we have traffic counts. For roads in Bountiful that are higher use roads, it does make sense to have, a little bit more density on those corridors. And so for things like townhomes, cottage courts, triplexes, fourplexes, and I like how it says they're generally limited to areas with direct access to major roadways, providing transition. It makes sense that in neighborhoods you would have higher density nearer and then
300
backing off.
I think.
I want to point out, I am opposed to a fourplex that's 3 stories tall, where a single family currently resides. I don't want to create language that allows such a thing.
147 west, 300 south. So were you done?
Yeah.
Okay. I think that, honestly, maybe the most important job that I feel right now as a council member, as long as we have the ability to do so, is to protect this legacy neighborhood type. I really do. And I picture duplexes, triplexes, and fourplexes going up on Davis Boulevard. And sure, transportation-wise, that might make some sense, but I don't think, to me, it makes sense with what we've got there and the legacy that I think we need to not squander. So I'm really comfortable having that pared back greatly or removed.
Do you think, I don't know if this is, where this fits in this conversation, but do you think that looking at traffic, counts, like if there are certain roads that we know are the highest used roads or something, I mean, it seems to me that like Davis Boulevard gets less traffic than, say, Orchard Drive or Fifth South or, and so I'm just wondering if, and that is getting into specifics, which I know we're not getting into specifics, like where on the map we're talking about, but to me, that makes a little more sense because I'm more willing to see a little more density in those higher traffic count areas. I don't know.
We can do two things or two things. First one, we could remove the language. We could remove fourplexes, triplexes, any language from here. So that's a discussion we should still have. Or we can add that these higher intensity residential uses that are only located in, say, a collector road with these traffic counts, and I don't know what those traffic counts are. We could certainly add language to this category that would correspond with whichever residential land use type you feel comfortable with. We're not, we can remove any of this language, and that's okay with us. And the whole point is that it would match the scale of surrounding residential neighborhood uses, which is the next sentence that says on that. So I think fourplexes is something that I think the council is uncomfortable with. Let me see, oh, my computer keeps timing out. Is triplexes something that you also have issues or you have comment on? Let's
Only
talk.
if they look like Larry DePay's threeplex on 300 South. So put that specifically in there.
I am not familiar with that one, so I'm gonna have to go do some.
You'll know where it is. It's 140, one of the units is 147 West, 300 South.
I'll say, well, we can put a picture on it with.
Oh, no, that's the one we want.
Oh, that's the one you want.
Absolutely. It's gorgeous. And
So-
it's a threeplex.
I can think of one in my neighborhood. It's a single-family home for everybody that
Passes by.
even
yeah.
walks by. You wouldn't know. And you go around back, there's a place in the back and one underneath, and it fits very well into the neighborhood. And so can we add, maybe beef up the language about this? I know we talk about scale, but talk about the mass and add some architectural language. I know that's a very carefully slippery slope with the state, but somehow I feel like so much of our city already has this and it works. I don't want to go backwards.
Yeah, and duplexes don't mean the same thing, and fourplexes don't mean the same thing, like if it's done well.
So I think on Davis right now, just south of 3100, on the west side of the road, I think there are several twin homes, at least a couple of twin homes there, they fit with the neighborhood. They look nice. I'm okay with that. What I don't want to do is open it up to the pillaging, essentially, of all of our collector roads or major roadways, so that these neighborhoods now begin to transition into other place types.
Let me give you a quick example of, without getting too specific, of the vision that at least that I've been able to develop as it relates to these different land use types. And I'll be quick. Let's just say that a single-family dwelling stays at the minimum lot size of 8,000 square feet. That's the current code. Let's say that we introduce a duplex. We say the duplex would be allowed on a lot that's 11 or 12,000 square feet. We're not saying that we're going to take that same duplex and we're going to, boom, plot it down where it's a lot, a developed lot that we would be able to put a single-family home. And then it's a scale that we would have to work out in that, okay, a triplex, now we're looking at something between 14 and 15,000. Fourplex, and that is a method, not the method, but a method of how we're able to slowly start controlling the density as we incorporate some of these other components that Councilmember Bell indicated for scale, mass, and architectural feature. I just wanted to let you know that it's not that, here's a minimum lot size, go ahead. You could fit the fourplex, go for it. It's not like that. That's not how I would recommend it, at least, if we were going down that route. It would be some sort of increasing scale that correlates between the minimum, which is the base, the single-family dwelling, and whichever residential type or density we have. Just to give you a precursor without letting you know any specific neighborhood or development. That's how I would recommend it.
But then the examples that have been presented are talking more to curb appeal. Because if you say triplex and fourplex, people go back to what that architecture looked like in the 70s, which was an eyesore and not very appealing to anything. Where if you look at Toupe's place on 300 South, the curb appeal makes it so you don't even you can't even tell that it is, a duplex or a triplex. And the council member Bell's example in their neighborhood, you look at it from the curb appeal, you don't see that it is something else. So I think in the general plan, obviously you can't go into the curb appeal aspect, but that is something that probably should be documented or at least referenced, that there has to be a policy of curb appeal.
Well, I guess regarding that is obviously parking.
Yes.
Right. Absolutely.
When I think of a fourplex, a lot of times I think of a twin home, boom, 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 doors lined up, it's cookie cutter all the way across, it's all the same. But goodness, if we could get a creative architect that can do some undulations with the building facade, it'd be gorgeous. And I think this is the kind of social reason I feel like it's important. I believe that Bountiful can accommodate more people by dispersing them over a wide area than a single high-rise or mid-rise building, downtown.
Yeah.
When we do great big large buildings to accommodate population, it can become very burdensome on the neighborhood that's immediately around them. But if that's dispersed, it's so much better socially and economically. But I share the concerns about houses getting torn down and rebuilt and having this ugly mass building and not being able to do anything about it. That is a genuine concern. I think the hope of mine is that we can increase our density in a way that is not seen.
What do you think about the 1 to 3 stories versus 1 to 2? I mean, I do think, I mean, this is the bulk of our neighborhood area, and this would make these denser dwellings taller
Yeah,
than the homes that are nearby. And I think that's one of those things I think fundamentally changes the tone and feel of a neighborhood and pulls that out from underneath people.
I don't know that we need a 3-story house in our neighborhoods.
Our height limit right now is already 35 feet, and you can do a 3-story house in 35 feet if you have livable attic space easily.
Well, okay, that's a good point. I like the attic space being able to utilize, it's the roof line, you know, you can get another level in there without a roof on top of that, I guess. So I was gonna ask about the height limits, that would be as important to me as the floors.
So in some of our other, skipping ahead, in our density range, we have based on development parameters such as height, setback, parking, et cetera. If we, why not put that? Why not put something like that that just says, like, we already have a height limitation, and that's it? If it could be a single-family home and be 35 feet, then, you know, still not, I am not comfortable with this density. But if I lose on this argument and we have it, then it can go up to 35 feet. But I think it does change if you build a box, a square box that has 3 distinct stories. It changes the look and feel and the character of that neighborhood. So, and I think 3 is a signal to that, saying 1 to 3.
So you're suggesting that instead of saying that, how many stories, you're just suggesting that we list a height cap?
Yeah, or we borrow the idea from what we've got in some of the areas that are coming up where we've said, you know, it's based on the development parameters for those zones.
Francisco, Amber, do you guys have thoughts on that?
We do. The first one is, the last one. We've been thinking about that, and it would be a better idea to base it on the development standards. Our codes are kind of funny right now in that it has a belt and suspenders. The density is 4 units per acre, yet the minimum lot size is 11,000 or 8,000 square feet. It's either one or the other. And the R4, the density allotment, works out better for younger cities that are trying to develop that have vacant land. So that developer gets a better, faster, quicker idea of how many lots he can get. And then obviously they have to carve out area for public roads, X, Y, and Z. Now, regarding the height comment, the intent that staff had was never to increase it in this place type. That's why we stuck to the 1, 2, 3. Which our thoughts is to simply keep it at the good old 35 feet, which is the maximum building height. So not an issue there. Amber and I have been discussing exactly that and base it off on the development standards, but that only works if you have a base for each use, in that you have a minimum lot size for a single-family dwelling. You want to go bigger? Great. You have a baseline, a minimum lot area for the duplex, for the triplex, for the whatever residential land use type. We can come up and have a quick math and come up with a density analysis that comes up with that. But we don't. It actually does work. We believe that it would work as long as we have that minimum base.
But if you do that, then to your point about controlling that, Bountiful doesn't, I mean, I think of some neighborhoods that are just continually age and age. And for a young family to come in, they're not gonna be able to afford a home we have today. It's $500,000 for a small outdated home, and then be able to put another $200,000 in a neighborhood that's just gonna continue to run down. The only thing I can see is someone being able to come in and buy it and put on a duplex or something of that sense. And if they wanted more than that, because of your square footage, they may not be able to put a fourplex because they're not gonna be able to buy a lot that meets the needs
Right.
for that. So then it starts to limit what they can do when
Right.
they buy it, or go try to buy the neighbor's house on top of the one that they have.
Right.
I guess I would say we're not, across the state, we're not seeing that developers are buying and building more affordable units. So I'm less concerned with their ability to buy and then buy a series of our most affordable older homes, and tear them down and then replace them with more density that would be affordable. Our development going in at the old saloon at the Brooks site, those are condos that are going to be almost $600,000 versus what was there that was affordable.
Yeah, those were affordable.
So
They
I'm
weren't livable, but they were affordable.
I'm not sympathetic to developers, needing to come and have additional density so that they can build less affordable housing.
I do have another question concerning this place type, and that is, there's a good number of homes in this area that are built on half-acre lots that had orchard behind them or massive gardens behind them or whatever. And we still don't allow flag lots. And I'm wondering if the council has any appetite to, or staff has any appetite to take on the issue of flag lots for increasing density without blighting a neighborhood. What are your thoughts on that? I hear other cities talk about them all the time, how they believe they're a good tool.
Yeah, we, at the very, very, very beginning, we had a discussion with the consultant, and then we shared with them the city's current policy based on infrastructure nightmare that takes place on flag lots. And I believe that was the reason why they chose not to include it. That's my limited knowledge and opinion. Mr. Cheney can, as a public works director, he can further comment on that. It's been a longstanding policy from the city to simply not allow them.
It has been.
Rather than a utility issue, I think some of the bigger issues may be emergency services access. Serving utilities to a flag lot is generally not a very high hurdle. With the water and irrigation, those are pressurized. They can run in nearly any direction. Sewer can be a little more challenging, but we're blessed with a lot of slope here in town, and so that generally isn't too high of a hurdle either. But I think emergency services and maybe the creation of some new activity where, in a place where there hasn't been any activity, becomes the bigger issues.
Has that policy changed, come and gone over the years? Because I know of several flag lots in Bountiful,
I
but
think the code was silent on them for a while, and the first policy Bountiful had was against them, I believe.
Yeah, it's in the code where they're simply expressly prohibited. I couldn't tell you when that kicked in. Lloyd or Richard been here way longer than me.
Yeah, I don't remember when that went away, but I have a vague recollection of it. In my mind, the places where there have been issues or maybe conflict has been where we've had multiple properties on the stem going into flag lots, where you have people who can't remember or have forgotten, what the arrangements are for access, or who's plowing the snow, or who can park where your garbage can be. Those are the things that stand out in my mind from a livability standpoint, people just being civil and getting along. But, the one-off flag lot behind some homes, I can't really think of a single incidents where those have been a problem or where we've had complaints about it. It's more like where you get 2 or 3 or 4 homes together and people just
and the
aren't
complaints
living
probably
along.
don't start till the second owner.
Right.
Because the first generation owners all were in agreement it
Understood.
was a great idea.
Yep.
second or third come in and they don't like the circumstance.
This is just an item to discuss. I'm not passionate about lobbying for them. I just think as we try to accommodate more folks, maybe find ways to, keep more of our offspring in town, then might be a tool.
It's a good question, especially I know that, we need more, there's a housing shortage, and then also there's very limited land. So it's kind of, we're being squeezed from both ends. So, yeah, it's a good question for sure, and one that we should revisit at least occasionally, so.
In terms of if our staff is going to research, look at that, is some of the challenge to flag lots how much frontage they have, whether they're wide lots versus skinny, deep lots?
Exactly it.
Perhaps there's some way where we could just identify some minimums, like if your lot is wide enough and deep enough, then it can make sense, but if it's just a very narrow, deep lot,
Yeah.
then there isn't a way to accommodate 2 driveways and the access that would be needed.
So is the council good to put that question on hold while we're going through this general plan process so that our staff has direction to continue focusing on this issue, this immediate issue?
Well, I brought it up because I think that now's a great time to discuss it if we want to add it in. Adding it in later after this plan is developed and doesn't say flag lots will be too late.
Does the council have an appetite to add it in to the,
I think we have an appetite to ask more questions.
Yeah.
okay?
I don't think I have enough information to say yes or no. I think it's an intriguing concept to try to add density, but I fully recognize that it's problematic and difficult. It's more complex than most. As I think of flag lots, like Councilmember Bradshaw mentioned, that's really critical. I picture those skinny, long, deep lots would be good for redevelopment in a new single home on there that might be a triplex that you can't see from the street.
So, as we look just in general at the neighborhood residential, there are a few takeaways that it seems like questions that we had questions about whether we want to keep the language where we're specifying certain allowed uses, talking about scaling, perhaps, to be able to talk about what uses would be allowed. What other?
Council, do you want me to try and summarize what I heard from,
Yes.
on this area, the changes?
Let me say one more thing, new idea. Very briefly, the top left picture there, I don't think represents what this zone would be. But that could be studied and looked at and decide as far as density goes, that looks pretty tight. Anyway.
Those are tight.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No, that's great. Thank you. This is the kind of feedback we need. So I think I'm going to kind of go at this maybe a little bit backwards. Residential use structures in this place type are generally, it seems like we should leave 1 to 2 stories because it does say generally 1 to 2 stories. Doesn't preclude 3 stories. This doesn't dictate height. That's a function of the zoning code. This is, again, describing the general character of the neighborhood, which is what I think I heard you say. Are you comfortable with that, Francisco? And does that sound okay? Okay, so leave that 1 to 2. Now going back up to the types of uses, while much less ubiquitous in the place type, other typologies, what if we just left it with townhomes and cottage courts? We got rid of triplexes and fourplexes. And we could even take out being limited to areas with direct access to major roadways, that whole sentence. And just begin again where it says these more intense residential uses should match the scale of surrounding residential uses, residential uses, and be designed and planned to blend into the surrounding neighborhood context. Again, we're talking about a feel here as opposed to specific, but that's kind of what I heard, is that we don't want to encourage people that just because it's on a collector road that's a better place for it. They need to fit in, and generally speaking, we're not talking about the fourplex. We're talking about something a little more unique. So what do you think?
Does that describe it? I think that describes it pretty well.
I'm getting more comfortable. I think understanding the density we think a cottage court is going to be, and maybe it's that we need more pictures of what that's going to be, especially if we're switching out pictures, because I'm, as I'm thinking about our density of 5 to 7, units per acre, is a cottage court supposed to be like, for instance, the development by Viewmont with those is that a cottage court? What's a cottage court?
That was the question I had earlier behind the scenes. I'm not really sure. I think Larry Dupay's place that Richard mentioned, we call it that. I don't think he lives there anymore.
Oh, doesn't he?
I don't think so. But on 147 West, 3rd South is an example of that, where you come into there's a common court between 3 homes that are probably connected. I don't know. I hear what you're saying, though. I mean, that's the problem. I'm not sure how to define cottage court, but it seems like you're looking at something that's less dense and massive and blocky than a fourplex.
But is it also single-family detached? I mean, the one that I think everyone always cites is Boulevard Gardens in Salt Lake City off of West Temple and about 18th South, which is a very unique development. All the homes have their front yards facing interior. But if that's a cottage court, and those are all single-family detached, but they're the back of the house faces the street. I mean, I don't know. That's a unique development. I mean, I'm willing to hear more and learn more and think about it, but if we're putting it in the plan, I'd like to understand what exactly we mean when we say cottage court.
I agree with that. I'd like more information too, to know what that officially means. If we could change Gary's one word of townhomes to twin homes, then I'm completely comfortable with the rest of the things that Gary said.
So, so if we make the changes that Gary recommended with the change that Richard is recommending, and then if we ask staff to come back with a picture that represents a cottage court.
The only caution I'm going to give you is that Bountiful City currently, we don't define a townhouse. So let's just pretend that we have 3 units in a townhouse configuration. That's a triplex. We should start treating them differently. And now we get into a function of density. There's a lovely 4 townhouse development on 2nd West. If we say that fourplexes and we don't define townhouses are out, we lose that use type from all over the city. So I think before we start necessarily removing uses, my recommendation is let's further define them.
Can you tell me where that townhouse development is?
2nd West, 3rd North.
3rd North?
Is that it?
Yeah.
That's a fourplex? Well, it's 4 units, right?
It's pretty tall and skinny for the lot that it's on.
It is. It's right on the corner there.
Yeah.
What would be the definition of the 5th South and Orchard Drive corner?
That's a mansion-style apartment building. You're talking about, I'm sorry.
No, they look like townhomes, but they're all.
You're talking about Brighton Homes?
Yeah, the Brighton home.
Yeah, that one tends to, we call those mansion-style multifamily.
Okay.
So I think you don't want to lock yourself into My recommendation is further defining and understanding what we mean by these types, or what, with pictures, I think. Simply because of we don't define a townhouse, and yet a townhouse is a completely different product than a triplex or a fourplex.
I think that's great insight. Do you feel like it's an awkward place to stop, but because we knew we weren't going to get through it all tonight anyway, do you feel like you have some good direction of things to do and then come back with?
We do,
Okay.
and obviously we'll continue to work with Mr. Hill here and the concept that he had. We only say this because we do care, and I'm not saying other people don't. It's just that our intimate knowledge of our current code and how we define some of these features need to be further explored.
Mayor?
That's how I'll say.
Yes,
For my own clarification, and I'm sorry about the time,
it's okay.
would it be possible to poll the council and find out what the unit count they're comfortable with is in this zone?
I have a substitute idea, because we're past
Please.
7. This is the bulk of Bountiful, and this is, in my opinion, the most important character area we could address.
Sure.
And I would suggest that we've given staff some things we need them to bring back to us so we can better wordsmith this one and make sure that we get it right, because it's the most important of the areas. And so that we consider this area not finished. It's what we do on the
Still-
next, we come
still
back
to
to
be
this exact
discussed.
section on the next work session, so we can have the poll you've discussed, we can have pictures, we can have better examples of cottage courts and those types of things.
So we'll pick
Right.
up,
I don't want to mess this one up. This one's the most
Mayor,
important.
that's a better recommendation than mine.
we'll pick up where we left off. So thank you, Amber, thank you, Francisco, thank you. Okay, we're just going to take a very brief 1-minute break, and we'll come right back for our regular council meeting.